Welcome to the Google Cloud Update for the week of April 9th, 2026. I'm your host, and we have a jam-packed episode for you today. It feels like the entire product team decided to ship new features all in the same week. This week, we're diving deep into a massive wave of updates across the board. We'll start with the explosion of new AI and machine learning capabilities, including natural language querying for your databases in Cloud SQL and Spanner, and new metadata filtering in the RAG engine. Then, we'll spend some serious time on BigQuery, which has received a treasure trove of new features, including the highly anticipated BigQuery Graph, stateful continuous queries, and a generally available connector for Snowflake. We'll also cover significant updates to databases like Cloud SQL and Bigtable, new features for GKE and cloud storage, and a critical security bulletin you won't want to miss. Finally, we'll wrap up with a whirlwind tour of updates in security, observability, and a huge number of IAM role changes. There's a lot to get through, so let's get started. All right, let's kick things off with artificial intelligence, where there's a ton of exciting news. First up, in Vertex AI, the RAG engine, that's Retrieval Augmented Generation, now supports schema-based metadata search. This means you can define a metadata schema for your document corpus, attach that metadata to your files, and then use it to filter the contexts during retrieval. This is a fantastic way to make your RAG results much more precise and relevant. Over in PubSub, the AI Inference Single Method Transform is now generally available. This lets you get inferences from Vertex AI models directly on your PubSub messages as they stream through. The model's inferences are added right into the message, making them available for downstream processing. This is a game changer for building real-time AI pipelines. And for our database fans looking to build AI agents, the Query Data Tool is now in preview for Cloud SQL, for MySQL, and PostgreSQL, as well as for Spanner and AlloyDB. This incredible tool lets you query the data in your database using conversational language. The preview release has even increased the accuracy of its SQL generation. This opens up a whole new world of building data agents that can interact with your core business data. Sticking with AI and data, MemoryStore for Redis has a new remote MCP server in preview. This server lets you connect to your MemoryStore for Redis instances directly from large language models and other AI applications, making it easier to use Redis as a vector database or for semantic caching. Now, let's talk about BigQuery because, wow, what a week! It's clear the BigQuery team has been incredibly busy. First, and this is a big one, the BigQuery data transfer service can now transfer data from Snowflake to BigQuery, and this feature is generally available. If you're working in a multi-cloud environment, this is a huge win for simplifying your data pipelines. The data transfer service also got a major boost for other sources. Incremental data transfers are now in preview for Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, and ServiceNow. This means you no longer have to do full data dumps every time, saving you time and money. For those of you doing real-time analytics, you can now use stateful operations in continuous queries. This is in preview and lets you perform complex analyses by retaining information across multiple rows or time intervals using joins and windowing aggregations. But perhaps the most exciting BigQuery news is the launch of BigQuery Graph, now in preview. You can now model your data as a graph and perform analysis at a massive scale directly within BigQuery. You can create a graph from your existing tables and use Graph Query Language, or GQL, to find complex relationships that are difficult to uncover with standard SQL. You can even visualize the graph schema and query results in a notebook. This is truly a powerful new paradigm for data analysis in BigQuery. And the AI and BigQuery story just keeps getting better. 2 new functions are in preview. First, the AI.argg function lets you semantically aggregate unstructured data using natural language instructions. Second, you can now use the built-in embedding Gemma 300M model in the AI.embed and AI.similarity functions, which uses your BigQuery slots to generate embeddings at scale. Finally, for governance, you can now use custom organization policies to control specific operations on BigQuery tables, data policies, and row access policies, which is now in preview. And for the SQL nerds, the @@ session ID system variable is now generally available for use with UDFs, table functions, and views. Whew, that was a lot for BigQuery. Let's shift to some other key data services. In Bigtable, you can now use Gemini in Bigtable Studio to help you write Google SQL queries. This preview feature brings generative AI assistance right where you're working with your data. Also, two major features are now generally available. The Bigtable JDBC driver, which lets you connect from any Java application or reporting tool that supports a generic JDBC adapter, and the ability to use protocol buffer schemas to query individual fields within protobuf messages stored as bytes. Over in Dataflow, when you use the minram or CPU count resource hints, auto VM selection is now enabled automatically. This means workers will be provisioned from a curated list of machine types that meet your requirements, helping you optimize costs and performance without manual tweaking. And a quick note for DataStream and Database Migration Service, both now have a remote MCP server in preview, allowing LLM agents to view and manage your data streams and migration jobs. Let's move on to our container and compute services, starting with Google Kubernetes Engine. There's an important security bulletin this week. A high-severity vulnerability was discovered in the Linux kernel that can lead to privilege escalation on container-optimized OS nodes. GKE Standard clusters are impacted. To fix this, you need to upgrade your node pools to the specific patch versions listed in the security bulletin, so please check the release notes for the exact versions you need. The good news is that GKE Autopilot clusters are not impacted in their default configuration, and clusters using GKE Sandbox are not affected at all. On a related note, the new GKE versions rolling out to the rapid, regular, and stable channels also include updated container-optimized OS images with the latest security fixes. Also for GKE, a quick change to note. A previously announced feature for faster log processing has been rolled back due to an issue in an underlying dependency. So, for now, those performance improvements are not in effect. In Artifact Registry, you can now manually pre-warm images using the API. This is a great feature to help reduce cold start latency for your deployments. And in confidential computing, live migration is now generally available for C3D machine types running on AMD SEV, allowing you to migrate these secure VMs without downtime. Now for our storage and backup services. Cloud Storage has a few nice updates. First, you can now delete up to 1,000 objects in a single request using the Multi-Object Delete XML API. This is great for those of you using Amazon S3 compatible tools. Also, object contexts, which let you attach key value pairs to your objects, are now generally available. And to manage these at scale, you can now use storage batch operations to update object contexts for multiple objects in a single job. Over in Filestore, there's now a generally available integration with the Backup and Disaster Recovery Service. This allows you to centrally manage your Filestore backups with advanced features for data protection. Speaking of backup and DR, it also gained a 1-hour backup frequency for compute engine instances, support for shielded VMs during restore, and the ability to take application-consistent backups. Let's talk security. Cloud Armor preconfigured rules now support Mod Security Core Rule Set 4.22 as a rule source. This feature is in preview and gives you access to the latest web application firewall rules. In Parameter Manager, which is part of Secret Manager, you can now use the latest identifier to fetch the most recent version of a parameter without needing to know its specific version ID. A small but very welcome quality of life improvement. Now for IAM. There has been a massive wave of IAM updates this week. Dozens of editor, admin, and viewer roles for services like AlloyDB, Apogee, Cloud Build, Spanner, and many more have now reached general availability. Additionally, several service agent roles have received new permissions to support new features. It is a truly huge list, so we strongly recommend checking the IAM release notes for the week of April 7th to see if any of these changes affect your roles or permissions. Also, Organization Policy Service now has custom constraints for managed workload identity and workload identity federation, giving you more granular control. Finally, let's cover what's new in observability and other services. For cloud logging, you can now ingest OTLP formatted logs using an OpenTelemetry collector and the telemetry API. This is in preview and is great news for anyone standardizing on OpenTelemetry. And for Cloud Trace, the Cloud CLI now lets you configure trace scopes and manage observability buckets. Chronicle also saw a number of updates. The Health Hub is now in preview, giving you a central place to monitor the health of your data sources. The Search Query Editor has been enhanced with intelligent auto-suggestions and better error handling. And the Emerging Threat Center is now generally available with expanded filtering and a new MITRE ATT and CK matrix visualization. In Looker, there's an important announcement. Starting with the Looker 26.8 release in May, admins will no longer be able to manage the API credentials of their standard users. You'll need to migrate to Surface accounts if you require this access, so be sure to check the documentation on how to prepare for this change. Looker also has a new preview feature for table visualization improvements, including pagination and conditional formatting for string fields. And lastly, for Cloud SQL, a feature that many have been waiting for, you can now manually reduce or shrink your storage capacity for MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQL Server instances. Be aware that this can incur considerable downtime, so for critical instances, migrating to a new, smaller instance using the database migration service is still the recommended path. Also, for SQL Server users, Cloud SQL now supports SQL Server 2025 across Standard, Enterprise, and Express editions, and integration with Microsoft Entra ID for IAM is now generally available. And that's a wrap for this week's Google Cloud Update. From the massive new capabilities in BigQuery like Graph and Snowflake transfers, to natural language querying in our databases, and critical security updates for GKE, there is a ton for every cloud professional to dig into. As always, check the release notes for all the details we couldn't fit in. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another dose of Google Cloud news.